When a president leaves the White House, you'd think their time in public service is over. But for many, it's actually just the beginning of, well, a private gold rush. We've gone from worrying about former presidents facing financial hardship to an era where leaving office might be the single most profitable career move they ever make. So, how did this become the new normal?
Okay, so let's just rewind to a single week in May of 2011. This was right after Osama bin Laden was killed. President Obama invited George W. Bush to a public ceremony at Ground Zero. Bush said no, saying he wanted to keep a low public profile. But, and this is the key part, his private schedule, totally packed. In the days that followed, he gave 3 paid speeches, one to a Swiss bank, one to a hedge fund conference, and another at a PGA event. He was cashing in for what was probably 6 figures a pop.
And this quote from Laura Bush really just drives the point home, doesn't it? The public was hearing that he'd stepped out of the spotlight, but behind the scenes, he was very busy building a multi-million-dollar career almost entirely out of the public eye.
But, Bush's speaking tour wasn't some one-off thing. Not at all. It's actually part of this much bigger bipartisan trend of cashing in after leaving the most powerful job in the world.
Now, to be clear, he wasn't the first person to do this. Ronald Reagan, for example, caught a lot of heat for taking huge paydays after he left office. But it was really Bill Clinton who perfected the model. He blazed a golden trail that others would follow, and he turned the ex-presidency into a systematic, multi-million-dollar business. And hey, Clinton was pretty open about it. He once said at a forum that he'd done reasonably well since leaving the White House. As you're about to see, reasonably well might just be the understatement of the century.
So just how well are we talking about? Well, let's look at the numbers. In his first 2 years out of office, George W. Bush pulled in an estimated $15 million just from speaking fees. That sounds like a lot, right? But then you look at Bill Clinton. Over his first 8 years, he raked in a staggering $65 million. He completely changed the game.
All right, so how on earth are they pulling in these kinds of numbers? Well, it's not just luck. There's a pretty well-worn playbook, and it usually boils down to 3 main ways they make their money. First up, you've got the super high-priced speaking circuit that we've been talking about. Then there are the giant, multi-million-dollar advances for writing their memoirs. And number 3, a bit of a newer thing, are these really cushy and high-paying jobs at prestigious universities. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about with these speaking fees, Bill Clinton's average rate is reportedly around $250,000 for one speech. I mean, think about that. That's more than the presidential salary he used to earn for a full year's work, all for just one talk. And then, of course, there are the book deals. For his memoir back in 2008, Bill Clinton got what was then a record-setting advance of $15 million. These massive upfront payments have basically become standard practice, a huge part of how they build their post-White House wealth. And this whole playbook, it's not just for presidents. I mean, just look at Joe Biden. For decades as a senator, he was known for being one of the least wealthy guys in Congress. But then, in just 2 years after leaving the vice presidency, bam, he and his wife Jill earned over $15 million, mostly from those same 2 things, book deals and speaking gigs. And that brings us to that third income stream. In that same 2-year window, the University of Pennsylvania paid Joe Biden over $775,000 for a professorship. A role that, by the way, required him to give some talks and seminars, but didn't really involve teaching any formal classes. But here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. While these former leaders are out earning millions in the private sector, guess who's still picking up a big part of their tab? We are, the taxpayers. This all comes from something called the Former President's Act of 1958. It was actually passed because Harry Truman was having a really tough time financially after he left office. The whole idea was to make sure ex-presidents could maintain a dignified public life without going broke. But as you can imagine, that was a very different time. Let's circle back to Bill Clinton for a second. Between 2001 and 2015, the exact same period he was earning over $100 million from speaking fees, he also received nearly $16 million in taxpayer-funded benefits. This covers his pension, his staff, and even his expensive office space in Manhattan. So you see the issue, right? This mix of huge private fortunes and ongoing public funding, it's what has a lot of historians and government watchdogs asking some tough questions. Like, where exactly is the line between public service and private profit? Presidential historian Robert Dallek, he didn't mince words when talking about George W. Bush's speaking gigs.
He basically asked, what is he doing except enriching himself, and called it self-serving.
And this connects to an even bigger concern about money in politics, the famous revolving door. Princeton historian Julian Zelizer says that for a lot of people, these huge corporate paydays look exactly like that. Public officials cashing in on their fame and connections the second they leave government. So what do the former presidents themselves say? Well, George W. Bush was surprisingly upfront about it. When someone asked him what his plans were, he just said he was going to hit the lecture circuit to, and these are his words, replenish the old coffers.
And all of this, it really boils down to one big fundamental question. The title president is for life, right? It comes with this incredible amount of public trust and symbolic power. So when a former president uses that title to make a personal fortune after leaving office, who are they really working for anymore? The public they swore to serve or themselves?